All right, so I've cleaned out all the little bits of alginate. You can see that I got, you know, a little handful, no pun intended. And most of that alginate in the crevices are gone. You can see there's still a little bit of remnant, but I don't think that that's going to be too much of a visual problem. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is tidy up the wax. So this is sort of the beginning of the wax welding conversation, but you can see, I think, where's the camera? See how there are some little hollows where bubbles got caught, and also a little bit of rough detail where I poured the wax and it hit the mold, so it's a little, so there's like a little seam right there. I'm gonna smooth that out very gently as to not injure the skin texture, but just to give it a little bit of love. So I'm gonna fill in some bubbles and I'm gonna smooth out that skin texture. So it's just a little bit nicer. And I'm going to go over to the wax station and fill this little pot with some warm wax, and that'll be used both as the glue and as some material to fill any holes. So I'll be right back. So think that I'm gonna try to make this object, sort of like this hand sort of growing out of this tincture bottle. There are some things that you can consider when you're thinking about making your amalgam object. You obviously have two parts of your object that don't have any detail where the wax was poured into. So those are sort of natural places to connect because you're not going to lose any detail. So maybe like that, but I'm not really interested in that. And the other thing that you're thinking about is there's also obviously going to have to be a place where the glass pours in, similar to the sort of opening where the wax pours in, that you can also add into your consideration. The other thing that you might consider as you're planning on how to weld your objects together is there anything wrong with one of your objects that you want to sort of cover up? And I think that that's where I'm landing here, is that there's like a little bit of a mess on this side that I think I'll cover up. And then you also have the option of chopping up your waxes that way. And I'll show you a cast glass hand that was chopped in half, two glass hands that were chopped in half and welded together when we're in class. And that's also an option. So for example, if I wanted this to be smaller or cut in half, I could potentially do that as well. So there are a few things that I want to do to these waxes before I weld them together. And that is to make these surfaces, the surfaces that are going to attach, a little flatter, because you can see that there's some gapping happening. So I'm going to go over to the wax station. I'm gonna bring you with me. So here we are over at the wax station, and before I got started, I turned on this hot plate. This is a really good tool for flattening wax objects. When you turn it on, it turns on to 200 degrees on this little dial here, and no hotter, otherwise the wax gets too hot and starts to smoke and it is bad to breathe in. So I'm going to look at all the detail that I have here, know that I don't want to lose much of that. So I'm gonna press this down and watch how it's melting and sort of exert pressure away from the parts that I want to preserve. You can see that it's just readily melting off a bunch of wax, and now I have a more flat area. So I'm just going to place this over here in off camera in a silicone tray to cool off. And then for this object, I can either carve away some of that sort of weird unevenness, or I can just use the wax plate to melt it all off. I'm going to turn so I know that it's sort of melting evenly, so the object is staying sort of upright from here. And I can tidy that up a little bit more. And then I said that I wanted to connect the hand and the object on that weird seam. So I'm just going to press that down. I'm going to bring my head a little level to make sure that I'm flattening that area evenly, and also so I don't lose any detail in the dropper top. So I don't want that to get too close to the heat source. And I'm gonna lift up. And now you can see that I've done a nice job of flattening. And I think that's all that we need to do over here. So I'll bring you back over to the work table. All right, so I have my two flattened objects that I want to come together. I think that it's going to have to be like this. And maybe it's an object that doesn't sit flat on any bottom. And I think I'm okay with that. All right, so I want to connect these two spaces here and then here. So what I'm going to do is that I have my little wax pot and it's still soft, but not so hot that I can't touch it. So I'm going to take really any tool, maybe a little wooden tool, and scoop up some of that soft wax and put it on the table. And I knew I was going to forget a tool or a material. I'm going to grab a little bit of Vaseline because that's going to help my fingers not get too goopy. Be right back. So I have the communal tub of Vaseline. We're gonna share this and just wash our hands before and after. I washed my hands before I started, so I feel pretty good about that, but maybe we'll make a rule that we wash our hands before we share the Vaseline. And I just got a little bit on my fingers, just enough to coat my fingertips. So then when I work the warm wax, I don't get super goopy sticky, because that's not going to make the wax working particularly easy. Alternately, you can put on rubber gloves. It's a little warm yet, so I can't roll it, so I'm going to separate it out. The other thing you can do instead of leaving it in the pot is that you can pour it out onto the table like I did before, and then scrape it up when it's still a little warm, and then you can use this as your welding stick as well. So I'm going to work the wax into sort of little snakes, little lumpy snakes. We're going to use this material to basically as glue. I'm going to go back and forth. There's sort of a sweet spot where the wax is malleable, but not so sticky that it's going to make a mess of your hands, and too cold. So for the cooler stuff, I'm going to sort of work it between my fingers to warm it up with my body heat. And for the warmer stuff, I'm just going to let it cool a little bit, come back to it, etc. That's a really nice temperature for that one. These are still a little goopy, so we'll start here and let that cool off. So I have my little wax worm, and I'm going to start here and just press it in. This connection is going to look ugly for a little bit, and that's okay. We'll tidy it up. That's part of the sculpting process. So I'll show you a couple ways to apply the wax, and then I'll go off camera and do a bunch of tidying, and then we can return and look at this object. And then we'll come after that, we'll look at the object, and then I won't do any more work to this object, and we can explore it in person in class together. And the last thing that we'll video is just talking about sprues, and I'm just saying that word a lot even though you might not know what it means. I'll explain it more in a little bit, but I just want to plant that new bit of vocabulary in your ears. So I've pushed a lot of this sort of warm, malleable wax into the connection. For one side, I just smoothed it so it's just flush, and for this side, I built up a little bit more. And I'll just do a little thin area right on top to complete the connection. So now I have this wax glue that have connected my two objects. Now I'm going to use some of the tools that I brought out to begin to smooth it out and to make it look nice. So you can use your fingers. It's kind of my default tool to smooth. But you can also use the Fordham wax welder. I turned this down before, so let's see if it has enough heat to do the job. So I'm gonna bring it, yeah, that looks great. Bring it to the seam, and notice that I'm pressing into the area, the glue area, not the cast hand. This heat will obviously eradicate your detail. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit. So what I'm doing is sort of smoothing the area right behind the detail to really encourage a nice seam. So that's one way to do it. One way to encourage really good connection, and also really nice, even and easy shaping. Oops, a little off camera there. Really satisfying tool. Still a little bit rough, but we'll continue to work on that area, make it look the way we want to. Go over here. I'm feeling pretty good about that connection, but I can smooth it out a little bit here. I'm sort of pushing and dragging, and that's allowing me to use the tool in the way that I want to. So it's not passive, but a little push. Little push. And then carefully up here, I'll also make that connection. So that's the way that we can use the Fordham. If I was connecting two sort of narrower things, I can also use the Fordham to help soften and warm the two areas so they'll connect better. The other thing I can do is use the more sort of analog Fordham, which is lighting a little tea light. And then using that flame to warm up my metal tools. So I'm gonna look for maybe like a gentle flat spoon shape. Give it a little bit of warmth. Please be mindful if you're warming up the tools to put them in a place where people won't just put their hands down on them, or you won't put your hands down on them, because that is a great way to get a little burn. Nobody wants that. So really similar to what the Fordham is able to do, but with a lot more shapes available to melt, sculpt, and connect. I want to show you one more tool here, and then I'll pause do a little tidying and come back and show you the results. In your toolboxes, you will have added some ladies' pantyhose. Well, I don't know if they're ladies, just pantyhose. Whoever wants to wear pantyhose can wear them. But they are a really good tool for once we are done with the shaping and the connecting. You can see that you have all these sort of tool marks. We'll smooth that out as best we can with our fingers and with our tools, but at the end, when we're really after smoothing, you'll take the pantyhose, add just a little bit of Vaseline, and that's a really good tool for sort of buffing out those last bits of surface to bring you up to a really beautiful satiny finish. So I'm gonna pause here, and when we return, I'll show you the results.